Hello, everyone. We are back with another episode of Life in Law, and our special guest with us today is Maryann Petri. Maryann, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
No problem. It's my pleasure. And did you want to just introduce yourself and tell a little bit about your background for our listeners?
Okay, I have been a victim and a survivor, but still a victim of the family court system and its criminality. And just a couple highlights was that when we divorced amicably without going into a courtroom. And that went on for 10 years until he remarried a woman who worked in the courthouse. Then it all went spiraling downward from there. So,
Wow.
And that whole thing was such a disaster. I wrote, this book as a handbook to help other parents get through it. It's only like 140, 150 pages, actually 145, whatever. But, just to help people, like what I did wrong, what I could have done better. I'm not a lawyer, that, and I'm not giving legal advice, but I'm showing the corruption that happened in the case, and what can happen to me can happen to anybody. This is disgusting what they've done to my kids.
Absolutely. And when somebody has such strong connections like that through a spouse, a family, a friend, it can destroy everything. And I think people underestimate like how much damage they can do to your case if they have somebody working on the inside against you, especially someone willing to put their career on the line for that. So, and this was in Pennsylvania, your case?
Right. It was in Erie County, Pennsylvania, the Mistake on the Lake. Everyone thinks Lake Erie is so great. I'm sorry. I've got nothing good to say about that city.
Is that where the Cash for Kids judge was out of?
That would be 5 hours away in Luzerne County.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was in Luzerne County. And I remember when that even happened, and that turned my stomach. And then here I find myself, going through it. It's just, everything just like, wow, it just hits you.
And so I know that you have your podcast, Slam The Gavel, which I also was on and came on as a guest. And so can you tell a little bit more about when did you start Slam The Gavel and a little bit about your experience?
Okay, the book was written in 2020 and it came out in March. And so I was supposed to be interviewed by someone and they reneged. So I thought, well, if they can do a podcast, why can't I? So I started my podcast September 20th. So I'm coming up on my 5th year anniversary, with this podcast of interviewing so many people with their horror stories. But it's also, not only family court, it's criminal court, probate court, which is another scary topic, juvenile, trauma and healing, because I've had counselors on. So I wanted to be a well-rounded podcast, people giving their input. I've had lawyers on, with their issues and their problems and what they see going on. And I've also had judges on. It's just been very interesting.
And do you like the judges that you've had on, were they former judges?
Right. I've had Judge Bompiani on, Anthony Bompiani. He's really good. He's also on Instagram. You can find his clips on there. He was easy to talk to. And, I think he's retired though.
Throughout all of these interviews that you've done, have you felt like there was common themes or common denominators that kept popping up? And if so, across all the cases, across all these states, what have you noticed is in common with the cases?
The common cases, they're all the same, just in different cities and states. There is the collusion issue, such as mine with the clerk that, enjoys her job at the courthouse, but other people that are whether they're middle class, but mostly wealthy, like, for instance, Lizzie Harding Weinstein. You know, these wealthy people, when they get divorced, this is how they treat the spouse of their children. I've noticed that common theme. I've had Elaine Mickman on, same issue. They get divorced, and these exes don't care about their own kids or how their ex is going to survive. And all they have to do is just play fair. I mean, that's what my ex and I did when we divorced amicably, right? But greed comes into it. The who knows who playing in the same sandbox. And it's just how people run each other down into the ground. And also another common theme, you know, if we go back to the Victorian era, when, you know, it was male dominated. It was back then. Things were male dominated back then in the Victorian and the Edwardian eras. So when they got tired of their wives, they put them in mental institutions. And so it's like, I noticed, like with Lizzie's story, and there was another mom this happened to, but they're still doing it today. So I've noticed that.
It's unbelievable. It's unacceptable, really, what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. I usually advise people, you know, if you meet someone wealthy, you know, you want to do background checks. I know this is going to be expensive, but do a background check on their whole family, all the family members. Who are they connected to? And who knows, they just might be wealthy. Okay, fine. But prenups, I know they can be broken, but it's good to have a layout groundwork of something before you go into anything with a wealthy individual. Because if this does not work out, and if there are kids involved, at least could it be stated in there that, you know, provided there's no abuse issues, of course, that we will co-parent and the children's lives will, you know, continue to go on as normal as you can after divorce.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that people don't realize, even with prenups and things like that, or even sometimes people will do a post-nuptial agreement where they will say, okay, if we have children, we will do this, and so on and so forth. But the thing is, and the reality is, that a lot of these things are not enforceable. You can't just bring your divorce decree to the police department and say, look, they didn't comply with Section A, number 2, enforce it. The police are going to say their famous line, sorry, it's a civil matter, go back to court. And then that is like a revolving door of the police send you to the court sends you to the police. It's just more money, more stress, more aggravation, and they're profiting from it. And so it's like, that's the main issue, I think. And, you know, not only is it that when there's money involved between spouses and they're fighting over assets and children, it's not only that, it's the greed of these government officials and judicial officers who are getting paid and matching their salaries on a 66 cents to the dollar, you know, going towards their pension, which is driving the motivation, which is horrid. And the fact that Congress enacted these laws, but looks the other way when people are crying for help, this is domestic terrorism.
It is. It is. And as you know, when we were talking about the prenup and the postnup, so if you do get sucked into family court like I did, because believe me, I didn't even know that thing existed until my ex hauled me in there. And but if you have that agreement, you can at least show the judge, here, I have this paper, this is what we agreed on. That would help with pattern. You know, it would show the judge, you know, like, hey, we agreed to this. We you know, thought we were going to work it out, but here it is. I agreed to this, and now it's not happening. And hopefully, because there are still some good judges out there, but for the most part, a lot of them are just, as you know, bad eggs.
Yeah. And also, like, I think I heard a story of a woman from Texas who her husband is a lawyer and going through a nightmare divorce with him. And she said they had a prenup, but then even though the husband was the one who drafted the prenup and used his lawyer skills to create the prenup how he wanted. He's now saying to the court that he signed it under duress, that he was coerced into signing it when he's the one who drafted it. But it's like the court isn't just saying, okay, we're going to enforce it. It's turning into this big fight and all this litigation. And so that's another thing. It's like, if you marry a police officer or a lawyer or someone in the military or anybody who has any type of power, you are at a higher risk of danger. And, you know, having a divorce or, you know, custody issue with somebody with connections, it's like a death sentence sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And I know
Right.
Lizzie's husband was a lawyer as well.
Right. A powerful one at that. Also, you know, when you mentioned police officers, I would not marry a police officer, anyone in the fire department, anyone in some political office, or an attorney. After this podcast that I've run, I'm afraid of everything that moves. Okay. I really am. It's like one horror story to the next horror story. Then we're talking about probate, and it's like, what is wrong? Everything's getting stolen from people. Children are getting stolen. The elderly, their homes, that's another podcast. But what is going on?
I know. And I think, you know, we've seen a lot of people now like coming out, like advocates who are trying to push legislation or start movements or organize protests. And a lot of controversy has come out of that. I know that you've had a few of the different people that are more vocal advocates recently and as guests on Slam the Gavel. And do you think that some of the things that people are doing are more off track from something that would help? Like for instance, a lot of people say that, for example, Tanawa Downing, I've heard people say that he was saying that he collected millions and millions of affidavits, and that he was at first saying like he needed donations and money to sustain his campaign to collect all these affidavits, and that he was going to file them in the Supreme Court, and that he was going to, you know, do something in the Supreme Court. Now, there's no docket number in the Supreme Court. There's no proof that any affidavits have been filed. Many people have given money, which now they're saying is going towards things like the cost of gas, the cost of travel, and all of that. But it seems like in the videos that are being posted, specifically of that a lot of these public officials will like walk out of the room and leave as soon as they start talking, or they'll start laughing, or they'll mock them and things like that. And it's like, you know, the public attention is good if it's strategic. I think that, you know, if there's public officials who are doing crimes and they're banking on the fact that the victims are going to stay silent, and that they can only continue to do these crimes if nobody notices it, then, you know, putting this public exposure on those specific people in your case, like the judges, the clerks, people involved, I think that can be effective, because it can cause public pressure to pressure these people to do their job. And, you know, if the public sees that there's misconduct happening in a case, or somebody's being failed by the case, by the system, the public outrage can sometimes push those people to do a better job. But I think that, you know, what he's doing with the "we shall be free" and stuff like that, I don't see how that's actually helping. And then, you know, there's other ones where I've seen, like, I've been vocal about people such as like David Weigel with his like Family Fraud Warrior Project. I know that he was just recently interviewed by Richard Luthman, and another controversial person who has slandered me and refused to take accountability for that or comply with cease and desist demands. And my question is, you know, how can somebody like that bring credibility to real, true advocates when, like, I saw that David Weigel was just saying that he's one of the only parents to ever win his case and get his kids back and win his case. But I'm hearing from people in New York that know David Weigel that the only reason he won his case is because him and his ex-wife are back together. and he convinced her to be back in a relationship. So encouraging people to just go take their ex back and calling that a win and misrepresenting it to an investigative journalist to say that I won through my court strategy, or I won through my advocacy channel, when in reality they're back with their children, they're back in that home because they rekindled the relationship that was toxic to begin with. So I just think, like, you know, those are examples. And then I know that recently there was some I was vocal about Stand with Meg, who has a lot of followers, and people personally attacked me about it. But there was a post, which I'd like to mention, that somebody showed messages where David Weigel said he doesn't care about the bad parenting that Meg does, which people showed videos of her admitting that she purchased HHC, which is synthetic marijuana, for her 14-year-old child, and did it with them because a child begged for it. And she justified that. She said that that was fine. And there was other concerns as well. And David Weigel said, well, she gets more eyeballs than anybody else, so we can overlook her bad parenting. And I think something like that just further destroys the credibility, because what is your goal? Is your goal getting views? Is your goal getting eyeballs on your case? Is your goal getting donations, getting money, getting paid per views, which I know that they do? And anybody who's sitting there posting their screenshots of their creator rewards showing that they only made $1 when the thing just got reset to try to say they don't make money, I would challenge that person to show the last 2 years of your creator rewards to show what you really made, because anybody can try to pretend. But, you know, I spend a lot of time to try to help people and go out of my way and stuff to help people. And I think that, like, I've been in law school, I've studied the law, I've been through this myself. And I think that, like, a lot of people are putting their trust in others who maybe never studied the law at all and are just using like AI and things like that. And then they take these people's advice and then they end up in jail, or they end up in a worse situation. And then the person says, well, I'm not responsible. This wasn't legal advice. And so I think that then it, like, the general public looks at it and says, okay, if somebody lost their kids, either A, they're not telling the whole story, B, they deserved it, or C, maybe there's corruption, but they think that those stories are rare. And I think that when people try to, like, exploit, like, vulnerable, desperate victims and, like, make a mockery out of, like, advocacy, I feel like then it, like, just ruins it for everybody, because the public is divided. The public, on every single one of those people that I said, and even on me, the public is divided. There's people out there who believe that I shouldn't have my kids. And so I think that it's crazy how the public can be so, like, swayed one way or another. And that's why I support, like, being transparent, which I try to be.
Right. And I also believe in transparency, because even in my book, I admit that I was under 2 false allegations of emotional child abuse, which I had to go and fight in front of an OCY judge here in Pennsylvania. It's OCY. And I was cleared, thank God, or I'd be on the child abuse registry from hell. I've interviewed some of these poor people that have said, like this one woman I interviewed, she said, if I just, knowing what I know now about family court, I just should have just stayed in this abusive marriage, because this is far worse than, this family court is far worse than staying in that marriage. This is scary.
Well, sometimes I ask myself, like, what if I had just stayed in this abusive relationship? And, my ex basically gave me that ultimatum. He said, be back in the relationship, or I'm going to take you to court. I'm going to take our daughter away, and I'm going to destroy your life, and you'll have nothing. And he did exactly what he promised that he would do. And because he knew he had those connections and the ability to just say the word and it would happen. And so it's like, I just feel like, it doesn't just go from so contentious where people are not speaking to each other and there's all these court proceedings and stuff like that, to now they're going to work together on going after the attorney or whatever it is. And those, to be able to go from, this side of the spectrum to the other, it takes many conversations and people trying to give each other a chance to get along again. And
Right.
would I recommend that with people who are extremely abusive? No. I think that some people are just, they're just not able to change. And even if you offered them everything in the world, like maybe they'll be good for the first few weeks, but then once that mask slips off again, the whole cycle happens. And, you know, it took me a while to learn about like narcissistic abuse. And when I was with Angelina's father, I never really knew what narcissism was. I thought that narcissism meant somebody that was like full of themselves and thought that they were so great and beautiful or whatever. That's what I thought it meant. I didn't realize that somebody who can have this like personality disorder of narcissism can not have empathy, can like use people like they're an object, and just literally like leave somebody for dead on the side of the road as long as it means that they don't get in trouble. And like, you know, my ex would say things like, he would be like, one day he would tell me like, I'm so beautiful and stuff like that. And then the next day he would tell me I'm ugly. And it's like, it's like, if somebody is telling you every day that you're ugly, like, it's like, you start to like question yourself. Like if they're telling you, you know, you look good. And then the next day they're saying you're fat or you're ugly or you're stupid. Then the next day they're praising you on how smart you are. The back and forth leaves you in this constant state of like uncertainty. And this is like their way of like kind of destroying your self-esteem. And it's like a cycle where they love bomb you in the beginning and they'll give you gifts, attention, everything you ever want. They'll study you. You say you like sushi, next thing you know, they're a sushi chef. You like traveling, now they're buying you tickets and telling you, go outside, here's your taxi. Like they'll do these extravagant things like to try to reel you in. And then once they trap you with a ring or a baby or a house with both names or whatever it is, then they start to be mean to you. They start to degrade you. And like, they'll be so nice in public. In front of everybody, they're charming, they're nice, they're charismatic. And then when you tell people about the abuse and them being mean to you, people don't believe it. And they're like, oh, well, I never had that experience with this person. No, that person's nice. What do you mean? Like, they're usually popular, they have friends. And then like, and then it's like, but behind closed doors, they're a monster. And then it's like, they eventually will like discard you. And then once they discard you, as soon as you start to like heal and get away from it, then they try to hoover you and come back. And like, you know, let's say you went no contact for 3 months, all of a sudden you'll get a text from them. Hey, how are you? Just to sort of test the waters to see if you'll give in. And with Matt, like there were so many times when I went like 3 months without seeing him, like 4 months without whatever. And then like, I was like, okay, you know what? I'll just give in. And then like every time the abuse got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And now I've seen him rotate through all these other women since me and him had last been together, and seeing him do the same thing, but like on a faster scale, where now it's like he's having them move in within 3 months. And, you know, it's like they're, instead of taking a year to make it them his girlfriend, he'll take 6 weeks. Like, so that's what they do.
Right. In fact, 2 things, because when my ex met this woman, they talked on the phone for 4 hours. She moved in 2 weeks, and within 7 months they were married. And that wasn't fair to do to the kids because we divorced at the tail end of 2004. So happy New Year. But then he meets her, you know, in 2007, in August of 2007. And then, you know, kids need time to adjust to everything. I mean, in fact, I introduced them. To be transparent, I played matchmaker. You know, we were acquaintances at a we were both bridesmaids in this friend's wedding. I'm telling you, you know what? Don't play matchmaker for your ex. That's my advice for anybody out there, because you don't know what you're doing. What, you know, if you don't know their personality, you know. But the thing was, I just wanted to give him dating experience. I didn't expect him to marry the first thing that was going to crawl across his plate. Come on.
And did you know that she worked at the court at that time?
I think she told me, and it didn't register, or maybe I didn't know, and I don't recall, because this was '07, and so much weird stuff has happened, and uh, maybe I did know, but I didn't think it meant anything at the time, until she said, when we were on a phone call, and that was I was still back living in my farmhouse, and she called me up. We were talking about something, and she casually mentioned, I know a lot of people in the courthouse, and I'm friends with all the judges. And I'm like,
Wow.
that came out of nowhere. I mean, really, it did. It came out of nowhere, because we were having a casual, we weren't yelling or anything. It's like, I don't know what that means. And then several months later, um, I had went to my ex-husband's house, and I took my flower pots, because I had bought my flower pots for my Mother's Day present when I was married to him. Is that pretty bad when you have to buy your own Mother's Day present? I mean, that's what
Oh
I
my
did.
God.
So I just took the flower pots, and he was ticked off that I took these flower pots. It's like, but they're Martha Stewart. I had to have them. I got them at Kmart, which is no longer in existence. And so he and her came over, and he pounded on my front door. And it's like, it really shook the house. This is an old farmhouse, over 100 years old. And I went downstairs, and they're both standing there staring at me. And he said something about the flower pots. And I said, but I bought them. They're mine. I actually physically bought them for my own Mother's Day present. I always try to interject humor when you're in an adversarial conversation with people. But then she piped up again. I know a lot of people in the courthouse, and I'm friends with all the judges. And
She said that during the dispute about the flower pot out of nowhere.
Yes, right. And that's when I took they were just standing there, and it was like, I don't know. I just slammed the door, because I was like, I don't know, they're crazy. I don't know what to think of that, but I'm ending it there. And that's when all, these attorneys get involved and try to force you into co-parent counseling. And that's when things really started heating up. I think a lot of people aren't aware that I wouldn't even call that mediation. That wasn't mediation. Because from what I had found out, my ex was throwing, spaghetti on the wall to get something stick with OCY as far as allegations. And apparently he'd been calling, they had been calling for years trying to get something on me, and they'd been turned down by the right caseworker, thank God. But until later, they found someone who knew, I'm sure, I can't prove it. Again, I can't prove it. But with her working in the courthouse in the probation department, I'm sure she knew a lot of caseworkers, right? I mean, I don't think that's too hard to figure out. I can't physically prove it, because these people are very underhanded. And I didn't have the money to hire a private detective to figure it out.
Yeah, and that's kind of like why, like, when I see, like, there's a lot of people, like, I know there's an advocate that was out of, I think, Texas, who's trying to push like a new, like, interference with child custody law. They're trying to make like a 3 strikes law and things like that about like custodial interference. And then I know like Francesca Amato has a bill that she's presenting that's on a federal level. And it's like, I see all these different legislative proposals, and I think about, like, for example, Jennifer's law was Public Act number 21-78, which was passed in Connecticut, and it went into effect in the end of 2021. I think in November of 2021, it went into effect. And Jennifer's law made it so that coercive control was codified as domestic violence. And so they created a criminal offense called coercion, which essentially means, like, if you, stop somebody from doing something that they have a legal right to do, or you force them to do something that they have a legal right to abstain from doing, then that's coercion. Whether you do it through threat or intimidation or fear or force. And so that's a criminal statute. I don't think that, since that statute has been on the books, and I will challenge anybody out there to prove me wrong, that I don't think that there has ever been a single arrest for that statute, ever. And I challenge anyone to go find me somebody who was arrested for that. And the worst part is that they created this law because there was a woman named Jennifer Dulos who made national attention because in 2019 she went missing, and then they arrested her former husband, who they were going through a huge divorce, and they have charged him with murder because they said that the amount of blood that was lost, it was impossible that somebody could still live. And then there was videos of him and his girlfriend taking bags of bloody clothes and stuff and disposing them in random trash cans all over in Hartford. And so like, I remember at the time I had just had Angelina, and this case was like really like kind of hit home because it was like right near where I worked. And my daughter was born like a few days after Jennifer went missing. And my ex was like, oh, well, good. Maybe that dumb bitch should have listened. That was what he said. Excuse my language, but that was his words, what he said about Jennifer, of saying, good, it's good that she's missing. She should have listened, implying listened to her husband. And so I was like disgusted by that. And like, I had just had a newborn baby. And then like everyone was following the case. And then all of a sudden they arrested him. They made the warrant public. And like me and the other lady at my job were like so obsessed with the case. We were sitting there reading the warrant during our time at work, and it was like 30 pages long or something. And I remember like getting like chills reading it because it was just like the description of throwing away the bags and all this stuff. And within a few months, the guy commits suicide and sits in his car and puts the engine on with the garage on, and they found him dead. And so now both children have no parents. And the thing is that this guy never put a hand on her. He never was physically abusive, but he was extremely controlling and coercive control. And it's like I ended up studying this case and doing an independent study on it in law school several years later after this. And I think that as soon as I told my school that I wanted to study this case, that all of a sudden it was like I became a target because it was one of the biggest failures. And there's literally been no accountability. The courts haven't taken accountability. But the first thing that she did when she filed divorce, Jennifer, was filed an emergency ex parte custody order. She asked that the court grant it ex parte. And if it says like, did you give the person notice? If not, explain why notice is not needed. And she said that she's afraid that he will try to leave with the children, that he had dual citizenship for him and the kids. He had access to private planes. He had all the money in the world, and that he had threatened her many times before that he would take the kids and go and take them to Greece, where he's also was a citizen, and say that she would never see the kids again. And I read her affidavit. She talked about, all the threats and everything like that. And said that she was afraid that if he finds out that she did this application, that he will try to hurt her. And they denied it. And then they turned around and gave him parenting time. And like, not only did they deny it, but they denied it because at that time, you had to prove a risk of physical harm, not emotional harm. And then they basically were like shoving parenting time down the guy's throat because they don't want to say, oh, if this parent is abusive, we're going to keep the kids away. They'll say in Connecticut, at least, like, oh, well, if he was abusive to you, that doesn't mean he abused the kids. So he could still see them. And so like in her docket, as I'm like studying it and going to the courthouse and like printing out her case file and reading it, it's like this many pages. And they all had all these expensive lawyers, and I'm reading the things that they're writing and all this stuff. And there's arguments about the money, hundreds of thousands of dollars getting paid for GALs and all of this. And it was just like a tragedy that like this ended like that because it came down to them fighting about assets, money, and the kids. But it didn't seem like she was trying to fight at all because her family was wealthy. He owed her mother a lot of money. She loaned him a lot of money, and he like was basically in debt. And so like for him, there was a big incentive for him to just get rid of her and think that it'll all just go away. But it's like the fact that story like haunts me. and that this law was made in her name for her and another woman named Jennifer, who I think was killed from a domestic violence case. And so like, it's supposed to be that now anybody can go in and show emotional abuse, financial abuse, coercive control, and get a restraining order. But when I tried to do that in 2022, 2023, 2024, and so on, I was retaliated against, punished, threatened by the judge, and looked poorly upon me. But when there's a Karen Riordan, another case that you may know from Connecticut with Christopher Ambrose. In that case, Christopher Ambrose's attorneys used Jennifer's law to claim that Karen Riordan coercively controlled the kids or the husband, and that now there should be no contact between her and her kids. So like, it's being used by like people who are literally abusing their exes and children it's used against people who are doing the right thing. And it's like making victims have literally like no help, and no judge will enforce Jennifer's law. No police department will arrest for coercion. And I tried. I even wrote a statement. I wrote the definition. I made it so easy for them. And they said, oh, well, this isn't a crime. So that's what I'm saying. Like people who are, anybody who's out there that wants to make a law or a bill and try to make a difference, make sure that you are including in there words about enforcement, and making so that there's a federal oversight body that specifically is there, so that if the law is not being enforced, that people can file a complaint with that federal oversight body and maybe have a reason to sue them in federal court and force them to comply with the law. Otherwise, if you're leaving stuff up to the states, they are never going to police themselves. The states think that they could do what they want. And so like, without federal oversight, you can't have a uniform law work and actually be enforced. That's my thought.
Right. Even when I was given supervised visits, because I'm so dangerous, and I would go to pick up the kids, and the light was on, no one's home. So my dad and I would go to the state police, and we said, here is the court order, can we find the kids? And so they would call the DA on call. Everyone knows this drill, I'm sure, if you've been through it. They call the DA on call, who says, oh, they're in family court. Just have them take it back into court. So I had collected how many state police, I don't know. What I had since learned is we have these laws, these penal codes on the books for the last 40 years. Every state, not just Pennsylvania, but these policemen are not trained on this in the police academy. So I understand. I mean, it's good that people are trying to make a difference and trying to make these laws. But like you said, we've got to get them so that they will be enforceable. And I think some of them are written with the it shall be, but I think I had asked, when will the police academies, when will the state police be trained on this custodial interference? And it's going to take time. Okay. So probably by the time I'm 80, maybe there will be actual change and children's lives won't be that horribly destroyed. But I also remember, when you're in this situation, I called up my ex-mother-in-law. I said, where are the boys? And she answered me in this sinister voice. And she says, I don't know where your boys are. So that's when we had to go back to the state police again. And then my lawyer said, just stop going. He did not know about the penal codes. So the lawyers don't know. All they do is file an emergency petition, which we did go before a very good judge. And I'll tell you, Theodora, he was hot. And that was helpful. And he actually gave me more time. He actually started screaming at my ex. Like, I've never heard a guy like He was voluminous, yelling, and I just kept my head down, like he's so cute, I can't look at him. But anyway, but yeah, so he wrote the order that, and again, he gave me more time, but the ex ignored that one too. And then when we got into family court, the judge ignored that. The judge ignored that fellow judge's order and didn't say, okay, so he gave you more time. You're not showing up with the kids. Well, guess what? You are proven to be the alienating moving party. If you're not cooperating with my order, why aren't these? Well, because my case was rigged.
Yeah, I was just going to say at that point, they probably said, call the judge, make sure that this case goes to this judge for our next hearing. And then that's where the rigged case began.
Yeah. And it actually, it started from the very beginning. And just to let you know that when I wrote this, my publisher said, well, I don't want to say Erie, Pennsylvania. So I put in that I was a bachelor's degree nurse from Connecticut. That's how I had to write. I had to change some things around because she was concerned about getting sued. And she does not have a team of lawyers like maybe Penguin would have or some other bigger publisher. So I had to change some things around and names, which I gave everyone demonic baby names.
And then now you have is the book that you're coming out with next your second book or your third book?
It would be my fifth book because I have, if you're bored and you want some poems, Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth. I can't believe I wrote that many poems, but anyway, then I wrote Raised by These Wolves, how family and federal courts are failing our children because that's all they're doing. And that's a collection of parent stories, and they are credible. I've had them on my podcast. It involves a lot of, things. And the foreword was written by Brian Vukadinovich, and I've had him on my podcast, and he's had his case in federal court. Also then I came out with Raised by These Wolves, Volume 2, Child Trafficking Within the Foster Care and Court Systems. And there is a lot of, there are domestic violence stories in here. And, there's stories from Florida, New York State. Some foster children are in here. Natalia Dalton's story is in here. I don't know if you're familiar with her story, but it's absolutely, incredible. She's in Virginia, and her ex has completely run the courtroom. And I just don't think there's any justice, at least ever in her case. She doesn't even know where her son is. She has not seen him. Her ex will not, he's the gatekeeper for her supervised visits. So if he doesn't like a certain, visitation center or, someone who's going to supervise, he just doesn't allow it.
That's what they did to me. They said my visits would be as determined by the father in the presence of a third party designated by the father. So he would just be like, sorry, nobody wants to supervise, or sorry, we're busy today, you can't have a visit. And he never gave me a schedule. Even when I offered to pay for like a censor or somebody to professional, all of these places said they needed dad to sign up and consent, which he wouldn't do. And then they said they needed him to give a schedule, which he wouldn't do. So like he literally would say to me, he would be like, why do you need a schedule? If you're not working, you should be available 24/7 waiting for a chance to see her. And you should be open at any moment for a visit. And he'd be like, unless you're really working and you're just lying about not working because you don't want to pay my child support. And it's like, it comes back down to the money. Like they don't want to, like, as soon as he started making more money and he knew that I could up his child support, he decided to stop paying completely and just use his connections to make it so it went to a certain judge who would just let it go, let it slide. And then, once we got this other corrupt judge involved too, she was Judge Grossman in my case also was involved in Karen Riordan's case and several others. And so like, there's many cases that are like high profile cases that she touched and destroyed and helped to traffic children. And like, you've had a lot of people that have given their stories in your books and your Slam The Gavel podcast. Have you seen people either where their children aged out of the system and tried to pursue justice on their own, or that the people who have eventually gotten justice? Because it seems like we hear all of these negative stories, but have you seen anyone who came out on the other side in your experience?
Kathy Wittrell in Florida, she's in my book. She had judge bias. And
wow.
she did cut, well, that wasn't her name, but we changed it. But yes, I mean, she came out because she found a letter that was thrown in a box. And that said that, oh gosh, it's in here. Where are you, Kathy? That's her. And
wow.
And she's been a great friend as well. And she's been on my podcast, season 4, episodes 134 and 137. And she's in a federal court as well, going after trying to get, the transparency of what has become of her children. So, the case, like when you go after these people, she got the judge disqualified. That was the big thing because of that letter. And it's so hard I guess in Florida to get anybody recused or get them off the bench. And so I was really proud of her. And okay, so that's one case. I'm trying to think, really, honestly, no. There really hasn't been. There was one in here where a dad got justice in Kentucky, and it was because the ex had been drinking and left a child in a car. That was bad. And so that's how he got his daughter returned to him. But then, and that judge, there was a different judge that did that. So then somehow it got reversed. I'm trying to think of how that happened. I thought
the other side didn't appeal.
Yeah. Or she came up, the mother came back out of nowhere and wanted the child back. So they went back before Judge Denise Brown. And if you go on Facebook, there's a Facebook page called The Nightmare of Judge Denise Brown, something like that. And she returned the daughter to this mother. And I'm just like shocked and horrified. I got to reconnect with him. I'm make a note of that. And I can't believe it. I just can't believe that, something like that can happen to a child and then another judge can just overturn it. This is just, I am so disgusted. I'm just so
and
disgusted.
It's like people, and it's like, it speaks volumes that like after all these years and all of these stories that like nobody is getting real justice. Like maybe they might get a temporary win here,
Right.
a recusal here with something here, but then next thing you know, it's like you take one step forward, 10 steps back. And
right.
It just seems like this corruption is so prevalent everywhere and it's being suppressed where, videos about this are getting not many views and like people are not seeing it on the news because at least in Connecticut, they said that they have private contracts. The state of Connecticut has contracts with the media news companies. And they said that any news story that makes the judges or the courts or the states look bad, they're not allowed to post. So I contacted the news and I was like, this judge is blatantly violating the law, violated my rights. This is a crazy, insane story. And they were like, oh, well, we're actually contractually banned from reporting on things like that. And I'm like, wow, that is insane. How is it legal for a so-called sovereign state to make private business agreements to censor the media when we're supposed to have freedom of speech, right? Doesn't that violate, isn't it like no state shall infringe upon the freedom of press, freedom of speech, freedom of religion? But then again, we have like judges who are putting like orders into my daughter saying that she no longer has to attend church when I was the one given sole religious decision-making authority and the state has no grounds or like authority to rule on how my child will practice her religion. And then it's like living in a one party state. I feel like we're in like a communist state. And I know some states are worse than others, but it's just like the fact that nobody gets in trouble, that even when people get arrested and get indicted, they're given a slap on the wrist.
Right. Right. And going back to the visitation where the judge gives the ex full control over when the other spouse will see the child, the mother or father will see the child. Okay, so these judges, and I've noticed this, they allow the opposing attorney to write the order. Have you noticed that? I've noticed that not just in my case, but the judge will talk and then the opposing attorney will pipe up like mine did and said, well, Your Honor, I can put that in the order. It's like, well, why don't I write the order? Why can't I write the order? The thing is, no judge should be giving any ex full control over visitation. That judge should be stating, okay, so you're going to go at this visitation center 4 times, whatever, and make the rules. And if the ex doesn't like it, then of course they're not going to like it, but the judge should turn and look at that person and say, and if you interfere with this will be custodial interference. These are the laws, and this is what can happen to you if you interfere in this. Why don't they just put their foot down? Why? Because they're getting paid off, or they're in collusion with the opposing attorney. Somebody knows somebody.
Yeah, and it's almost like now, like these judges are using things like supervised visitation as a punishment. It's like you did something wrong that we don't like. So now your punishment is supervised visits. Your punishment is losing custody. When even somebody who's charged with the most heinous crime, even if somebody's killed 100 people, in no court of law in any country will their sentence include losing access to their children or loss of custody or anything like that, because you can't just take away somebody's parental rights because they committed a crime. You can't take away somebody's parental rights because they are in contempt either. And like the thing is, like with all these like DCF and the child protection services and stuff, like they will like have all these federal guidelines that'll say like, okay, like their goal is supposed to be to keep the family as a family unit. And if they remove a kid, they're supposed to give a plan to the family that says, okay, the parent has to do so many classes and have supervised visits for this. And then if they do X, Y, and Z, then they can get their kids back. And so it's like with DCF in a situation, like if somebody is like on drugs or something where like it's something where they legitimately are a danger to the children and DCF is putting them on one of these plans, like they'll work with this parent to try to get them to like get with their children, versus in family court where you have like perfectly fit parents who have never gotten due process or a chance to, be proven unfit or dispute that. And then the judges are issuing these like orders, like a punishment. So it's like, it's skirting around the Constitution because it's also skirting around federal laws. And then like, they're just like, well, we have judicial immunity, so you can't sue us. And we have discretion. We could do whatever we want. It's our discretion. And then the federal courts, you try to go sue in federal court, they'll say, well, the domestic relations abstention doctrine says that anything to do with domestic relations is reserved to the states. So if the states are violating our constitutional rights in domestic relations matters, there's nowhere to get justice. There's no recourse, because good luck getting a federal judge to even entertain that. And then you see people going to the highest level courts and still getting shafted. And like, I just discovered that the judge in the Second Circuit Federal Court of Appeals, there's a judge named Allison Nathan who just denied. I filed a motion to recall a mandate, which like in the Federal Court of Appeals, like they will be so strict, like with every little thing that you file, you need to include a cover form and a certificate of service. Like you can't make your own, you got to use their form. If you don't use their form, they strike your filing, but like they won't let you e-file. So like it goes back to like not being constitutional, because like attorneys can e-file and they can access PACER, but pro se's can't. They need permission from the court, which the court has never allowed me to have permission. So like they'll send a response in the mail, and the response will say, oh, you have until this day to submit the fee waiver form or pay the $600 fee, or else we're going to dismiss your thing. And by the time I get the letter, it's like past the due date. It's like they don't give you enough time, and then they're sending it in the mail, which is delayed and slow, and then they completely dismiss your appeal if you miss the deadline. When if you're a disabled pro se litigant, you shouldn't be held up to these strict, stringent standards. So I ended up trying now to like save all these like appeals that I had previously filed that got dismissed, and filing motions to put it back on the docket and reinstate it. And it says that in the Court of Appeals in federal court, usually in like substantive things, like they need 3 judges to make the agreement together. 3 judges have to be on a panel to rule on it, not a single judge. Well, this one single judge named Allison Nathan went in the other day and denied my motion to reinstate the appeal. It just wrote order from the judge, denied, with 0 explanation. So I'm sitting there like, are you kidding me? How is this one person? And then I'm like, who is this lady? And then I looked into her and I see her history. And she used to be a federal judge in the Southern District of New York before going up to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals as a federal judge. And she used to be a former aide to Obama and was working in the White House. And even more interestingly enough, she was also the judge for the trial of Ghislaine Maxwell. And so it's interesting how a judge who presided over one of the most high-profile sex trafficking cases in history is denying things in my case where it involves sex trafficking of children. And so I just feel like, these same like rings of like pedophilia, child pornography, sex trafficking, all these things that people don't like to talk about and like to pretend don't exist. And even our own government just thinks we're all stupid, and not telling us the truth, because we all know like the most powerful, rich and powerful people are on that list. And so it's like, if that's the case, if those people can't even get justice, how are the rest of us supposed to get justice? If the courts are controlled by these wealthy elite on such a high level, and it's global, it's not even just United States. You have powerful political figures from many, many countries that are involved in this, and it's sexual abuse of minors. And I just feel like this is something that I am passionate about, is trying to fight against human trafficking and child abuse and sex trafficking and sexual abuse of minors, because it's affected me, it's affected my kids, it's affected millions of people. And it's like every person I talk to, they say it happened to me, it happened to my sister, it happened to my mother, it happened to my daughter. And it's like, even I'm hearing men say it. Men are saying that they were sexually abused as children and openly talking about it now. And it's like, who hasn't been abused? It's like, you're rare if you haven't been harmed as a child at this point.
So then that makes me question, and I had this conversation a while back with a guest, but with how long family court has been going on, with how long these judges have been giving these children to the abusers, they're causing this to happen, to have these poor children be molested and essayed. So what will happen is they're creating these children that will have personality disorders, who will grow up, get married, and come back to family court and keep the hamster wheel going. And the system is by no means broken. They want it going this way so they can keep pulling in the Title 4D funding, B and E. So that is the main goal, because, the Title 4D also goes into the judges' pensions. They have to have that, right? I'm sorry, Mike.
Yeah, so, it's insane. And
right.
Crazy.
When you're talking about the computer system in federal court, I made everybody mail me hard copy because I was living outside of that city of Erie. And so the judge was saying, well, if you come in, the clerk can show you how to work it. It's like, I'm not going to drive 2 hours to have a clerk show me how to work something that I'm too stressed out to even focus on. So I said, I don't mind getting hard copy to everyone. The opposing attorney's giving me his hard copy. In a telephonic phone conference kind of towards the end, because I kept this thing alive for at least a year. I give myself credit for that. But the federal magistrate judge, he's a magistrate, Lanzillo, and in a telephonic phone conference, he said, I haven't read your motions. I'm like, we've been at this a year, and I'm thinking to myself, you haven't read the motions. So we got off the phone and I put in a motion for him to read the exhibits. Where are our taxpayer dollars going if these people aren't doing their jobs? Then I had the opposing counsel telling me that he knew both judges in the federal courthouse and he was going to get my case dismissed. And that's pretty much how it's going to go.
And is that what happened?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And I took it to the appeals and I kept that alive for, I think, 3 to 4 months. And then they dismissed it. So even if your case has merit, you can still lose. I think that's a hard part for a lot of us to grasp and get through, because we go into a courthouse seeking justice. The judge is going to be fair. No. In fact, I just did a TikTok talking about HIPAA and a judge recusal. And, it's amazing that was pulled on me when the judge should have recused himself in 2013, but he kind of stayed in it. He was the president judge at the time. But then in 2015, suddenly he recuses himself. Like, he should have done that back in 2013, because I used to work for his wife back in 1990 before I became a nurse. So we all knew each other. So why didn't you recuse in 2013? And that was President Judge John Trusilla. I don't know if he's still,
it's like every decision he made from that first time until he recused should also be reversed, because he knew about the conflict and he stayed silent for a year. That's unacceptable.
Right. Especially with the HIPAA in 2013, because I went over this on my TikTok, which I did place on my YouTube channel, Slam the Gavel. But I did show, I couldn't read the whole full transcript because I don't want to, bore everybody. But my attorney was adamant that they should not have the psychologist's records because, and he stated why, and I read that out. That's when the judge should have recused himself and said, oh, wait a minute. This is, I think I know her. That's Maryann Petri. Okay. I know her as Maryann by some other name. I'm recusing myself right now. That's what should have happened, but he didn't do it. And then he made us lose. So I'm thinking, okay, so you did that to us back in 2013 and you pulled it again in 2015. Because so in 2015, that's when, my ex was trying to get custody of all the kids. And the judge was saying, wait a minute, there was an indication of emotional child abuse November 12th, 2014. Here we are, January 29th of 2015. This is all conjecture. Why are we here? If the kids were in danger, why didn't the caseworker remove them back in November 12th, 2014? Okay, so then, all right, so let's say he didn't recuse himself. What he could have done is placed the burden on the caseworker that was standing there in her pleather cowboy boots and said, this is on you. There's no problems here with the younger children. Everything's status quo. You didn't remove them. I don't know why we're here. Bye-bye. I mean, that's what I would have done. And then, I just would have recused myself from other issues if I knew the mother or the father. But I mean, that's like a no-brainer.
Yeah. It's one thing if they really just didn't realize or they forgot, but it just seems like they knew the whole time.
Yeah, he knew. Right. Because in 2013, I was sitting in the pews, and I was just sitting there And the judge looked at me and he went like, why are you here? And I said, that's how I answered him. Like, so he should have put two and two together when my lawyer said Maryann, because he knows me by Maryann. Granted, maybe he got confused on the last names because I had remarried, but that's not the point. He should have said,
He still recognized you.
Yes.
He literally recognized you. That should have been enough to recuse.
In fact, I'm thinking of filing a judicial complaint based on realizing that had happened. And that's kind of what made me do the live TikTok a couple days ago. So
yeah, you should, because is this judge still sitting on the bench?
Yes. Oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah. And just think about like how many other things did he just look the other way and ignore. And it's like these judges, just the more they get away with things, the more that they think they could do what they want. And a lot of people think like, oh, well, if I sue or if I make a complaint or if I do this, it's not going to go anywhere. The system's corrupt, da, 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 da. And I say to them, like, even if you think that, just do it anyway, because then you have proof that you put all of this on the record and they still ignored it. And then if you take it to federal court and the federal judge ignores it, then you take it to the Department of Justice, like, because at the end of the day, like, these are crimes that people are doing, and not to mention all the financial fraud and stuff like that. And like, if there's systems in place with like, Title 4D and all of those, like, they're not supposed to exploit those systems and scam those systems, but that's pretty much what they're doing. And you mentioned before, you said, where does all this money go? The money is going to pay for their 6-figure salaries, state benefits, full pensions. I haven't seen a single one of these people that works at the court that makes less than like 70, 80 grand a year. Like, well, that's pretty good.
Right. I did look up where do the Title 4D funding goes, and it did say it goes into college grants and to pave the roadways. But then I think it also goes into the judge's pockets. But I was sick to my stomach when I heard it goes into college grants, because when I went to nursing school, I was on my own and I was only making a bank teller's salary. I should have stayed a bank teller. I'm telling you what, I just should have stayed a bank teller my whole life, because we wouldn't be having this podcast right now. I'm telling you. But, I wanted to better myself, and I, paid for my college, and I did have these grants, but I didn't know it was on the backs of parents paying child support. In fact, you'll love this story. Okay, I had some guy working on, I don't know, there was something going on with the gas meter on the side of the house. And I always said to him, hey, do you pay child support? And he was an African-American fellow. He goes, yeah. I said, what do you pay a month? He said, $2,000. I said, what? He said, yeah, 2,000. I said, do you know about Title 4D funding? He goes, yes. In fact, this is what he told me, that his ex said, why am I not getting my full 2,000? Well, it's because Title 4D funding, you know how they match the dollars? So she's not getting the full 2,000, right? She's probably getting what, maybe 1,800. I don't know. But he said, when he was trying to explain this to her, she said, well, then maybe I should go back for more child support and get the 2,000.
Wow.
I'm like, oh, I felt bad for him. It's like, oh my God. It's almost like, okay, all right, this is my opinion. And you can, okay, don't marry anybody rich, anybody connected. Okay, find that out. If they're rich and connected and this goes bad, you're going to lose. Bottom line, right? And then I guess this is a harsh thing to say. This is a horrible thing to say. I usually tell people, do not have kids. It's not a safe place to bring a baby into the world. Sorry. Had I known this was going to happen to my kids, I wouldn't have done it. I'm sorry. I really didn't think I was going to cry, but
it's okay.
I mean, they're totally personality disorders now. Of course, they hate my guts now because he bought them cars and whatever they wanted. And they've also, people that I've known for years, he's turned them against me. This is how, as you said, with narcissism, they come across all, and people blindly believe these people. Due to cancel culture, people are just believing everything they hear. I'm like, oh my God.
When's the last time you saw your kids?
Okay, so the oldest one with that came out with the emotional abuse indication November 12th, 2014. Really, I have not seen her. I only saw her briefly at my mother's funeral. And I thought maybe there can be a rekindling because she did hold my hand during the funeral ceremony. And I thought maybe there's hope. And, and we had talked a while, and she came over to my parents' house, and we gave her my mother's wedding band, and my father couldn't find the engagement ring because we were going to give that to her. So I said, well, hey, if I find it, I'll let you know. Okay. And this was great. And she took a whole bunch of stuff, which was great because, we needed to clear out the house for sale. So all the grandchildren took whatever they wanted that would remind them of their grandmother. Okay. So a couple weeks later, it was around Valentine's Day. I did send her some scarves I found from my mother and bag of Hershey Kisses to her college. And it was amazing that she even got it because colleges won't give it if you just send it to the college. I don't know why, at least with that college. But I talked to the woman in the office, and she said, yeah, she's coming down the hallway, and I gave her your package. And I said, I bet there's candy in there. And she just took it and left. And I didn't hear anything because I said, hey, we found the engagement ring. How do you want me to send it to you? Nothing, not even a word, not a peep. Then I saw her briefly at a stag and drag. Do you know what that is? Some people don't know what stag and drag is.
Is it like when someone gets married, they have the party before?
Yeah, they have a party. They have a party. It's genius, really, to raise money for the to buy a house or whatever. So it's fundraising, really. So my husband and I went there, and we sat with friends, and it wasn't bad. And then I saw the oldest walk in with her boyfriend, and he plays guitar. And I thought, oh, he and I would probably hit it off. So, I was looking at all the baskets because, they do these raffles. And I thought, well, I'm going to go over to her because you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Because if I don't go over to her, her father's going to say, see, she doesn't care about you. She didn't even say hello. You know what I mean? So then I went over there, and I didn't know what to think of this, but she answered me in a voice that I have never heard before. And I said, oh, hi, you look nice. And she says, that's fine. That's fine. You can go now. That's fine. And I'm like, and I kind of walked away, but I went back and I said, well, and her boyfriend stood up, and I shook his hand, and I said, well, I just want to tell you, you do look great, and I hope you're doing okay. That's fine. You can go now. And it's like, I'm getting out of here. So I went back to my table. She got up and ran to Daddy, and I don't know what, she went over, my boys went over and talked, and my other son walked away. At this point, my sons and I were still talking. Okay, that was 2023. Okay, so the youngest goes and gets married in 24, June of 24. And I really, honestly, I couldn't go to that wedding because I was fearing a false arrest. And I'm scared of Erie County. And my son also informed me he was going to dance with the step monster for the mother-son dance. And I asked him, where are we going to be sitting? And he said, oh, we have you in the back, way in the back. No one will see you. It's like, okay, so the mother of the groom is going to sit in the back. And, I told my husband I don't want to go. And he wanted to go because my son followed in his footsteps as a union steam fitter, local 449. So, they were really tight. And I'm telling my husband, I'm not going. And my husband was really not. he was not thrilled. He had, got an expensive hotel room. It's like, I can't enjoy myself if I'm going to be sitting in the back. I have to watch him dance with someone who is my abuser. And I'm telling you, the step monster was a true abuser. And nobody gets it. And I'm not going because I am worried about a false arrest. There's more to that story that I can tell you afterwards. But I don't want to talk about it now, but I can tell you later. How about that?
Yeah, definitely. And so that was last summer when the wedding happened?
Right. And we haven't talked to them since. In fact, my husband talked to the groom like a week before and said, hey, let's all get together afterwards, and we can talk this out. Let's all talk, after you get married and things settle down. We haven't heard a peep. I don't even the future daughter-in-law, I don't know what she was told, but you know how people act like they're afraid of you?
Yeah.
She was acting like that. I could tell her sister hated me. And, when people have been talked to.
Yeah, it's like they try to like demonize you and like paint you out to be this like crazy bad person. So then when the people see you, they've heard all these bad things and they're going to automatically like feel scared or weirded out being near you. And then It's like these kids are so young, like being told lies. And then it's like they grow up hearing lies and it just becomes what they think. But I mean, are your kids are in their, how old are they now? Like
27, 23, and 22. And then I was giving the daughter-in-law a break because, my son likes to work out in the garage and she could have been stuck in the house with the step monster and she could have been telling her whatever. And my son wasn't there to tell her to shut up. You don't know, but that's not fair to me. And, I even went to the bridal shower. My one friend said, you can't say no to the bridal shower. You better go in there. It's like, I don't want to. I just don't. And they had me seated across from my abusers, which was the step monster, her 3 sisters, and the mother. These are people that when they handed over custody, they jumped up laughing, whooping, clapping, and cheering. And these people scared me because I know this is a horrible thing to say, white trash. They're not of the middle class caliber. Does that sound horrible to say? I don't know how else to describe it. But they just have no manners. And here I am sitting across from them, and I had my friend with me, and she's texting me under the table because she said, let's just text under the table. She goes, this is uncomfortable. It's like, yeah, I know. And the thing, the bride, her mother was deceased. And when I walked in, they have you sign the guest book. And I saw what the step monster wrote. She wrote, your mother, so-and-so. And I thought, oh no, that's a horrible thing to do to the bride. Her mother's deceased. They even had a place setting at the table for the deceased mother. And here the step monster is moving in, taking over the mother role again, like she did with my kids. Forcing my kids to call her mom, the British mom. She's not British. So what I wrote was Maryann Petri, your mother-in-law that loves you. That's what I wrote, I'm not trying to, take over. I just would never do that. But we made it through that, but it was not, it just was like, I just couldn't wait to get out of there. Because when my son showed up, everybody wanted a picture of the both of them. So they had that picture frame that, the couple stands behind. So it looks like you're getting a picture of them. And it was like the Beatles entered the room and like they're like celebrities. And so it's like, oh, everybody's getting up, getting pictures. Okay, I'll get a picture. So I was wearing my hair down like this, right? And so I had no peripherals, right? No peripheral vision. And so I'm trying to get a picture of my son and future daughter-in-law, and I'm getting pushed around and jostled around because people are all excited and yelling and screaming. I mean, this is how these people behave, okay? And so I was wearing a heel about that high, and I accidentally stepped, apparently, on the step monster's foot. and it went right into her foot. And I like,
Oh
oh no,
my.
what happened? And I was like, because I could tell I stepped on someone's foot, and I turned and I looked to my left and she was standing there. I said, oh my God. I said, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to step on your foot. I mean, I was scared to death. And I went and sat down, and my friend said, didn't you know she was standing there? I said, I have no peripherals when my hair is like this. Okay. And plus you're getting, knocked around all over the place, trying to get a picture of my own son. Okay. So I'm not kidding, Theodora. The next day and Tuesday, I was actually waiting for a process server to come up and just serve me with a PFA or, protection order. I was actually had that in the back of my head. Can this happen? It was
It's traumatizing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I was waiting. I was like, if processor comes to the door, I'm going to answer it. I'm not going to, but I had that on my mind. She could pull that. She has a lot of power. In fact, I interviewed an attorney, and he even said the clerks in the courthouse have more power than the judge. He said,
yeah, sometimes.
Yes. He said, close your eyes and picture your courthouse. There's one side and then there's the other side, right? So you've got the clerks on one side, the judges on the other side, but they all communicate. They sure do, because I know I'm talking a lot. I totally apologize, but
No, it's okay.
The child support judge continuously called me by my ex-husband's last name. Then she'd correct herself. Oh, Miss Petri, she'd say. It's like, okay, she's calling me that last name because she's used to seeing the clerk who enjoys her job in the courthouse way too many times. So she's getting it, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Subliminally.
She's associating you with that name because that's who she's dealing with all the time. And, I did want to say one thing, because it is kind of sad how you said, like, when you saw your daughter after the funeral and stuff, how she was like being normal and nice and stuff. And then when you saw her again and it sounded like your ex was there, she was like, don't talk to me, or you can go, go. So it almost feels like, from how you described it, that maybe she just like can't let the father see her being nice to you. She can't show affection to you and when her dad is there, because she's afraid that of what he'll think or do. And the fact that the boyfriend was like respectful and shook your hand and stuff like that, he probably felt awkward, because it's probably natural to him to want to show respect to the mother of his girlfriend, and that's a normal thing to do. And so like he probably felt like, why is she being rude and stuff like that? But it seems like she's swayed by the father.
Right. And I'll be honest, if I were him, I would run, because based on the fact that the step monster works in the courthouse, to protect himself. I mean, I really wish I could have talked to him. I wouldn't have gotten into any particulars. I just would have said, hey, you play guitar. I do too. This is great. Whatever. I would have made small talk about guitars, honestly, because why go into this? But if he has any questions, I'll be really happy to answer any of those questions. Even the flying monkeys, friends that were my exes that were friends of mine, if they had any questions, why didn't they call me and say, what's going on? I would have been happy to talk to anybody and say, this is what's happening. Here's my side of the story.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, like, it's never in the child's best interest for it to be like this. Like,
no.
Like you said, now the children are adults and they're dealing with psychological, struggles because of what they went through, and they're going to continue to have struggles, and they have children and things like that. It's going to just continue. And so this is why, like, people need to break the cycle. And, it's like, it's just so sad how like generations of people are getting abused. And I just think, like, like you said, the court is a huge part of it. And they look at it like a shark seeing blood. It's like, oh, conflict? let's go. Like,
Let's go. Yeah. Right. Right. It's like, thank you, Judge Trusilla. Thanks a lot, Judge Sambrook. You're a real big help. Yeah. You know,
well,
these,
hopefully other people from, Pennsylvania and Erie County might hear this and maybe reach out if they've had the same
Please.
judges or the same clerk, or, I think that it's important that people like connect with other victims that of the same officials. And, I think that I've heard several parents now from Pennsylvania, including a father who I had on my show a couple weeks ago. So I think that Pennsylvania is on the map for this, and people are starting to come forward more and more. And the easiest way for justice to happen is if it's like a lot of people reporting the same person, because they can easily just say, oh, you're just a disgruntled litigant. You just weren't happy with what happened in your case and you're just mad. Sorry. But if you have like 10 different people that all were harmed by the same judge that write their statement and send it together, then it's a lot harder to ignore.
Right. Right. Because someone said, oh, go after the judge, even though he's deceased. And it's like, I know nobody wins these cases. Where is the justice? Because now his wife is enjoying his pension. And that's blood money, in my opinion. So if
and actually I have I had a federal judge who's now deceased. And I was considering going after, and I looked into it, and it just basically says they're still liable for everything they did while they were alive. And you just go after and sue their estate. And you have every right to do that.
Right. But then there's a statutes of limitation, but not on fraud, because he committed fraud on the court.
And also, as soon as you discover the harm, like you didn't discover the harm until now, after doing the research and getting out of the trauma where you can actually think straight for once. Now you've discovered the harm. And like you said, like with fraud and stuff, but there's always exceptions with the statute of limitations. Like we're talking about human rights and constitutional violations, which, it's not like this isn't like some common law, stuff. This is like the fundamental structure of our country is the Constitution. And like, if that is being violated, there's nothing that stops you from getting to go put that, petition the government for grievance. That's your First Amendment right. Even putting a statute of limitations on something can arguably be unconstitutional, because that's our First Amendment right, is to address grievances with the court. And, especially if you're pro se, you have disabilities, like nobody can come out of this without being disabled, because most of the people are leaving courts with PTSD and anxiety and depression and, trauma. And so it's like, that can be a lifelong disability that is completely debilitating. So, I would just say, like, don't let things like statute of limitations and stuff like that deter you. Look into all avenues, because, it's been so long, you haven't gotten justice really, and so many others haven't. So I think that, it's never too late to try another strategy.
Right. If I could get several parents that will come forward on Judge Sambrook, perhaps a class action type of thing, I was thinking, if I can get somebody to come forward. But yeah, it's just unbelievable. I never thought this was going to happen to me. I swear to you, never thought. It's far from my wildest dreams.
Well, at least you have, done one good thing, which is that you've created a platform for other people to share their stories, and you've memorialized all of these stories in your books and your podcast, where you've had hundreds and hundreds of people on there. So it's like, nobody could say that this isn't real, because you have personal accounts of real names, real judges, real stories. And so I think that, that's a really good thing that you've done. And are you planning to continue doing the podcast for a while? Is it something you're hoping to keep going with?
Up until I retire, I was thinking, I don't see why not. And you're going to be in the next book. So,
Yay.
so yeah, I was going to send that to the publisher on the 15th. So, trying to get all my other people and their stories in so I can get this in and get it out there. So yeah, I mean, the stories have to be told. I think I don't know if I told you this. Remember the orphan trains back in the 1900s?
Yeah.
Okay, I had a guest on telling me that. She said, okay, so they were taking all these kids, child trafficking them all to the west where all the settlers were to work farms. Okay. They abducted kids, that they called ruffians, but I'm sure they got other kids that were from good homes and had parents that were wondering what happened to their kid. Right. So once that story got out that, hey, these orphan trains are happening, this is what's happening, then they put a stop to that. Who put a stop to that? I don't know, but they just stopped doing the orphan trains. So my thought is the more we tell these parents' stories, the more people that come on with their stories, maybe this can help bring change.
Yeah, I do think it's also encouraging more people to come forward and share their stories and speak out. Because a lot of people, like even 2 years ago when I first started posting about my case, so many people were telling me, like in private messages, oh, the same thing happened to me, but I'm afraid to post. I'm not ready to start posting yet. But now I see more people posting than ever, where it's
Right.
like almost like the trend now is to talk about this, which is good because we need exposure. And
Right.
I know you mentioned the books. I wanted to ask you, are your books also available as audiobooks, like on Audible?
Yes, finally. Okay.
Okay.
So Amazon has them anyway, but they have offered, Audible. So that three of the poems aren't, and I think it's because how poems have a beat to it. So I think that's why this one is not, but the other ones are. So at least, thank goodness, and that didn't cost me anything. Thank goodness.
Did you narrate it in your own voice or did they narrate it?
Well, I picked a voice. I picked a woman's voice. So, I didn't want to do it. I just didn't want to do it because there's so much like this one's like thick, this one's thick.
I was gonna say you got a great like radio voice. So
oh really?
It would have been good in
what someone on YouTube said, is she trans? I'm like, oh my God.
What?
Yeah, it's like, no,
oh my God.
Yeah, it's like people are really
they'll say things like that and they'll comment it like on your video. Like, is she like, who are you talking to? This is your video.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, so I don't know. I mean, I always tell people to speak out. In fact, when my judge died, I put, because it was on the Erie County Facebook page or whatever it was. So I put, the celebration emojis, like 8 of them. They were announcing the death of Judge Sambrook, and here I am putting, these celebration emojis. And my ex brought that up in court to the child support judge, Judge Elizabeth Kelly. And so, Your Honor, she put this, and she's, she never really like looked at him. She was always looking at, she goes, I'm well aware. I mean, she complete monotone, and what a joke.
I know, right? It's like, but whatever they do is, no one cares when they do something wrong. But it's like, oh, she put an emoji, throw her in jail. It's like,
yeah. Well,
you know what? The judge deserved the judge. I don't know what the circumstances surrounding the judge's death, but it's I believe what happened.
Well, okay, so bear in mind, March 2nd, 2015, he took my kids away. I begged God. I said, you deal with him. God, I can't recuse him. There's nothing I can do with him. He's cruel. You deal with him. March 2nd of 2017, it's announced in the news that he died on the same date he took my boys away. So that was divine intervention. He died of pancreatitis, from too much great times at the Erie Club. I don't know. But yeah.
Wow. So on the anniversary, that's what I mean. It's like a lot of people like they really believe in the power of prayer. And it's like, I feel like our prayers can be answered in mysterious ways. And Maybe that, it happened for a reason. And that person clearly didn't live their life doing the right things. They probably hurt so many people and destroyed so many families. So it's like, then now they're gone. And it's like, I'm sure that there's more judges in there that came in their place of that judge that are just as bad, if not worse. But it's like, it just shows, like you said, like you prayed and, you asked for some kind of justice from God, and in a way you got it. And I don't think your ex should use your feelings against you, because you're only human. You didn't cause it. You're allowed to feel a certain way, and all of us are allowed to feel our emotions. No one should use that against us.
Right. And I never filed a false allegation on him. I never would ever dream to even call OCY. That never occurred to me. But yet they were, and I can prove that in transcript, because the second caseworker stated on my hearing with OCY, the second one, that the ex has been calling her office 3 to 4 times a week with updates between the mother and the son and the family court hearings. And I thought, oh, I'm going to buy that transcript. I didn't know it was going to cost over $500, but I got him down to $200. I said, hey, can I buy this transcript? I've had a heart attack. I'm going to get disability. Would you give it to me for $250? Well, I guess we can. But she did. So
Wow.
It doesn't hurt to ask, doesn't? If they're charging a lot for a transcript, doesn't hurt to ask to come down the price.
And also like when I first was getting transcripts, I remember I paid to expedite the transcript from when my daughter Angelina was taken from that hearing. I paid like almost $3,000, because they said it was to be expedited. It was like going to be like more than $10 a page. Like it was like more than like between $2,000 to $3,000, and other ones were costing me hundreds of dollars. And then somebody told me that as a disability accommodation under the ADA, they asked the court to provide all audio and PDF transcripts for free. And it was granted. So I was like, oh, well, if they granted it for this girl, then they should grant it for me. And I applied, and first they gave me a hard time, but then they granted it. And now I've told other people to do that, and they say like that they'll play games. They'll say, oh, well, we'll give you just audio, but not PDFs. Or they'll say, we'll give you just the PDFs, but not the audio. Like one person gets told that, the next person gets told this. And like, I'll tell them that like under the ADA, like they are not allowed to ask you for a doctor's note. They're not allowed to do this, this, and this. And like, as soon as they start standing on their rights and telling these people like, no, you're not allowed to ask for this, then all of a sudden they give it to them. So, every state has a different process for ADA, but that's a reasonable accommodation. And, even people in other states have gotten the same, where if you just like, for comprehension purposes, you shouldn't have to pay to get the transcript if listening to it and reading it will help you, be on the same playing field as these high-level attorneys who are probably getting it for free because the firm pays.
Right. Yeah, and the firm gets their transcripts for free, because when I left my last attorney, he was helpful, yet he was not, because he would not argue in front of Judge Kelly. He said he was friends with her, and I thought, oh, good, I have an in. Praise God. Nope, he would not argue in front of her. He sent the underling in. And I'm going, God, you deal with him. That's so wrong, because, there's nothing you can do when you've got a judge that's already against you. And so I said, God, you deal with him. And he died of a heart attack.
Wow.
Not long after that. Yeah. So
are you doing like magic spells on these judges or something? I'm just kidding.
No, really. I mean, God, God's really creative. God is, I'm sure people were wishing evil on me, like, oh, if that mother was dead, then the stepmother could live her dream of actually having her own kids, because she couldn't have kids of her own. And her sister even posted a picture of her with, my kids on the couch, or sitting together, and it read, the caption underneath was, here's my sister with her 3 kids. So I wrote on Facebook under that, no, I'm the biological mother of my 3 children, not this woman. I took it to
Did she delete
No,
Did
I
she
mean,
delete your comment? She left a
no,
comment.
no. In fact, I took a screenshot, well, with a camera, because we didn't have like camera phones that did that then, okay, in 2015, 2016. So I took my camera and I took a picture of it and I developed it and I showed it to the co-parent counselor and I said, this is what I'm dealing with. And she said, okay, let's send him an email or a text and tell him to stop this. So she helped me put together a text and I said, can you keep your white trash sisters away from my kids and this photography stuff? Something to that effect. And she let me do it. But
The mediator let you write that?
yeah, I was with her. I mean, she was sitting right by my side. I said, go ahead. And, and this has to be stopped. They can't be usurping the motherhood or fatherhood role from anybody.
Definitely. Well, I think that, your kids are still in their 20s. Like, I'm in my 30s now. I feel like sometimes, like, looking back when I was in my 20s, I was thinking in a way more immature mind state. And also they say, like, your brain still develops until you're like past 25, they say. So I think, eventually your children will see the truth and they'll be able to one day realize kind of the reality of the situation. But I think that you've done a lot to try to help others and, spending your time and doing your podcast and writing these books and things like that to sort of make a difference, to show people that this isn't just about you. This is like a national crisis, international crisis at that.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think, people should look at that as like an inspiration, because instead of you just giving up and being all depressed and crying and stuff like that, like you decided to channel that towards doing something else where, maybe you never thought you would be a podcaster or an author one day, but now you're doing it like full time. So it's good, I think. And I think you should, give yourself some credit and don't be so hard on yourself, because it's not your fault that they brainwash your children and stuff. And kids are very suggestible.
Yeah. It's a shame that this is happening. And I had talked to a mother yesterday, crying on the phone. I was trying to court watch and, then I had to start my podcast. So I had to jump off, but there was a language barrier. She really needs a litigator, not a family court lawyer. She's up against, this is California, another country unto itself. And it's like, because she can't understand something, the judge says, you're being difficult. It's like, no, she doesn't understand what's really happening here. It's really pathetic. And it's like, and she called me yesterday evening and she was upset on the phone and said, why is God doing this? Why is God allowing that? I said, God's not really allowing this. I said, if you really think about it, I said, God is here to hold our hands through this, right? This is how I look at it. Okay. But Adam and Eve effed up in the Garden of Eden. Okay. So when they did that, God gave man free will. Okay. I mean, I really wish they did not F up, because honestly, Theodora, we would all be in happy marriages. We'd be raising our kids in utopia. Everything would be hunky-dory. But no, they got the apple from the snake, and now man has free will. And look what a crappy job that's been done to children, how we treat our animals, from everything, the environment. This is what free will has done. So I was trying to tell her, don't be mad at God. God is here to hold your hand through this. That's what got me through it. In fact, I took my mother-in-law's, she's deceased. She was a perfect mother-in-law. Not the first one, no, but the second one, she was fantastic. But I took her rosary. I would always put it in my pocket. And my husband said, why? You're losing every case. I'm like, but it's a comfort to me to have her with me. And the rosary is a document of Jesus's life, really, whatever. That's another podcast. But I did win 2 cases out of 3 in the Superior Court of Pennsylvania, 406 WDA 2017. And you can see everything there. There was a one previously on a pension fund, and I'm trying to remember this right. I think it's 517 WDA 2015, because he was hiding a pension fund. You know what? This is how bad people are and why cases get dragged out. Why didn't he just tell our attorney what this pension fund was worth? $2,200. Really? We're gonna pay. You know, my attorney says, I'll give you a break because I know you're getting railroaded. I'll just charge you $2,500 to put this together to go to Superior Court. I said, well, okay, I gamble from here to there, and I try to win. And we did win because the judge was going to blow it off. But to get them to pay it, he wouldn't even pay it. That's how I ended up in jail. Just wouldn't pay it.
Wow.
So a lot of people caused this heart attack. There's a lot of players in this. And the cardiologist said this was not a normal heart attack. This is not normal. He said, what was going on in your life at this time? So I told him a little bit. And so now I'm stuck on, you know, these heart medications, which also cause depression. Some of them do. It's like,
That's why, like, the best thing that you can do is try to focus on, like, not being stressed, like doing things to decrease stress, like going for walks, you know, spending more time around in nature, or even like, you know, just doing little things to pamper yourself. Go get a coffee, go get your hair done, go do something for you every day, even if it doesn't cost any money. Just go take a bubble bath, you know, like you need to put time in your schedule for self-care, because the stress is so bad, and like even the smallest health problem will turn into disease if someone has too much stress. And my doctors say the same thing to me. They're like, you know, oh, are you stressed? That's the first question they ask. Do you have any stress? And I'm like, huh. So,
that's
but
just it.
you know, you got to take care of yourself, and you've done so much pouring yourself into others, and also listening to other people's traumatic stories. You're an empath that's absorbing those traumas, and like, so make sure you are just doing like things to stay healthy and care for yourself, because it's so easy to care for others but struggle to care for ourselves. So I like just encourage you to make yourself a priority in your health.
Oh, I'm trying. You know, I should take more walks. So maybe I'll walk to the mailbox and get my yarn, because I ordered yarn off of eBay.
Do you like to knit? You knit?
I knit and crochet. And my friend, I had this yarn from last summer, and she said, when are you going to finish this sweater? It's like, oh, I just had no ambition. You know what it is? You know what it's like when you're just, you don't feel like doing anything. I used to practice those guitars 4 hours a day. I used to be 4 hour a day practicing that thing before my nursing shift, you know, and that's how I took out my stress from my nursing career. But I didn't know there was going to be family court stress. That's a completely different beast.
You could even start like a little mini series on your YouTube channel of like how to knit for beginners. Like, I wish I knew how to knit. If you make how-to knit videos, I'll watch them.
Oh, you know what? Funny you should say that, because I did a self-care one, like I think it was like a week and a half ago. And I showed my granny squares of the little daisy pattern, and how self-care is important, and how we all need to learn how to knit and crochet. And I even included the dads, because they need to knit their hunting scarves, because I got deer back here that are going to try to hit our cars. You know, I try to make it funny, you know,
Yeah.
and I showed, you know, trying to crochet, you know, how to do a double chain, you know, so it was only like 15 minutes long or something, but it's up on my YouTube channel, Slam the Gavel. But
I'll definitely have to check it out. I'd love to be able to knit my kids like a little blanket or something small.
oh yeah, I mean, because knitting is fun, in my opinion. I mean, it can be stressful, but you know, I've done cables and all this baubles and things like that. But you know, hats, you know, like small, quick projects. You know what I mean? It's like it's all I can handle, small, quick projects. But you know,
That's the key. Just keep yourself busy, keep yourself occupied, little hobbies. Like those are all good self-care techniques.
Oh yeah. I'll even send you the self-care one. Whoops. I'll send this to you.
Okay.
I'll text it to you so you have it. You can look at it. But yeah, I thought it would be helpful, because I was going to have my friend on because she's a therapist and she couldn't make it. And so I thought, well, I'm in the mood to do this, so I'm going to do this. So,
yeah,
make it short,
absolutely.
Sweet. So.
Well, I just want to thank you again for your time and for coming on and sharing your story. I know you don't often talk about your own story. A lot of times it's you talking to others. So it's nice to hear your story and get a little bit more deeper knowing what you went through. And I can see why you went on the path that you did with Slam the Gavel, and hopefully, it continues on for many seasons. And I can't wait till the new book comes out.
I can't wait either, because you know what we're all going to do, like with all of us that are in the book, we'll do a YouTube of a celebration that the book has come out. So I'll let you know step by step as we go. I'll keep you and everybody else informed in the book. And I've got to call this other fellow. Thank God we did talk about this. I got to get his story, his update in the book, after his child was again taken away from him. But yeah, it's going to be fun. I try to make things fun. I want everyone to succeed. Advocates that are trying, if it's not me that stops family court, I hope somebody does. Maybe it could be you. I don't, who knows? You don't know who you're interviewing that could maybe stop the stupidity of this hell destroying everybody.
I have a feeling things are going to start changing course very soon. There's a lot of noise around family court, and they can't hide it for long. So
no,
I'm staying hopeful.
Yes, definitely. We're up against, this is a spiritual, warfare. This is terrible.
Absolutely. It is. But you know what? You're fighting on the good side, and you have a big heart, and I think that justice will prevail in the end. And, and the truth always comes out in the end. Always.
Yes. And I appreciate you interviewing me. And I didn't mean to lose it, but.
No, it's okay. Don't feel bad.
But yeah, I'd like to have you back on my podcast and, talk more and increase awareness. This is what we have to keep talking so we can hopefully end this like the orphan trains. Definitely.
And I would love to. I'd be honored.
Well,
thank you again. And thank you so much. And for anybody who wants to check out Maryann's podcast, it's on YouTube. It's on most major platforms. And she's also on Facebook and TikTok.
Definitely. And Instagram. Yep. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate you.
No problem. Thank you so much again for being on.
Okay.
Take care.
Thank you. You too.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Okay.